tackle conflict theory in this next lesson this week. So, conflict theory is the second of the three theories we're really going to hit hard this particular semester. It's also a macro scale point of view, just like functionalism was a macro scale point of view. But that's really where the similarities between the two end. It's a completely different point of view, a completely different color lens on the glasses that you're looking through when you examine society. So conflict theory is also known as social conflict theory. They mean the same thing. And this is one of the macro scale theories that as we move through all the different topics we're going to investigate this semester, you'll read sections in each chapter that analyzes those topics from this point of view, and functionalism and symbolic interactionism, the other theories that you were introduced to this week also. Okay. So, conflict theory is a macro scale theory, but instead of looking at society on the macro scale as though it's stable and orderly, they look at all those social institutions that we discussed in the previous lecture. They look at all those social institutions as being designed to create advantages for some portions of the population and create disadvantages for other categories of people within the population. Okay, and so what that means is it's designed to benefit some and disadvantage others. And so we have these terms called haves versus have-nots, okay? I forgot to put the S on the not right there, but haves versus have-nots. Haves, with an S on it, is referring to a collection of people within a society, our society, a collection of people who have access to and control over the social resources that are available. So this concept, social resource, is really important in understanding what conflict theory is all about, because conflict theory, the word conflict, refers to a struggle in society among different groups of people, huge portions of the population I'm talking about here, not just a small you and me level, but when I say categories of people, I'm talking about huge portions of a population who share similar characteristics to each other. And in this case, the characteristic that they share is that they have access and control over the social resources that exist. So resources, social resources, are limited in number. According to this theory, you don't have an unlimited amount of social resources. There's a limited amount of rights, of privileges, of raw materials that create wealth in general. Education is a social resource. So you can make a very long list of social resources. And therefore, if you look at, for instance, educational attainment, everybody who has achieved a certain level of education could be considered the haves, and people who were unable to reach that level of educational attainment would be considered the have-nots. And if you are a conflict theorist, you would want to examine the reasons why structurally society is set up in a way where some people never achieve. And I don't just mean a few people, I mean like a huge portion of the population is disadvantaged to the point where they're unable to achieve this. That's the point of view that a conflict theorist would have about society. So, all of the social institutions that I mentioned in the previous video, if you did not make a note of them, please look in your textbook about social institutions and please rewatch that video, because a social institution is a pattern for how you take care of the needs of society, and they work together like the bones and the supporting walls, the load-bearing walls of a building. All those different load-bearing walls are like the social institutions in our society, okay? So conflict theorists say that our society is built with inequality at the core. So those load-bearing walls or those social institutions are designed, from this point of view, they are designed to create categories of people within the population who can be considered haves and categories of people in the population who can be considered have-nots. such as voting rights. This is a topic that's still in the news today in the 2020s, but 100 years ago there was something called the suffragette movement, and this was a fight in society because men were the haves, white males were the haves in regard to voting rights, and females and people of color didn't have the same voting rights as the other group. And so there's the haves versus the have-nots. And so if you apply this theory to analyzing that era of history, you would see that the have-nots were a huge category of people without voting privileges, voting rights, and they banded together to cause social change so that that aspect of inequality in society would be stamped out. And so that's kind of what conflict theorists want to do. They are sort of the social activists of sociology, if you will, because conflict theorists don't merely study society and systemic parts of society just for the heck of it. They look at the social system and they try to identify inequality, whatever the source, whether it's money inequality, voting rights inequality, pay inequality, keep on talking about any of the inequality things. Where do they dump toxic waste? Is it near an affluent neighborhood or an impoverished neighborhood, right? So they'll look at inequality wherever it exists, and they will try to stamp it out and change the system. You hear a lot of calls in politics and in social justice arenas these days for a change to the system, because the systemic racism or systemic poverty or systemic, all of these different systemic words is talking about this macro scale point of view where society is designed with inequality at its core. And that is what a conflict theorist thinks about whenever they are formulating questions to apply to a research method or a research project. They think of that to formulate their questions, and they have that on their mind when they are interpreting the data that is collected from all of the research methods that are employed in sociology. So this is a major lens that is very commonly used throughout sociology today. Just like functionalism, it's a major lens that is very commonly used throughout sociology today, but both are extremely different, aren't they? So it's very vitally important for you to understand both. You have to understand both. Listen to what I'm telling you. Understand both of them, but it's also going to be completely normal and expected for you to like one more than the other. One of these two things are probably going to make more sense to you than the other. You should understand both very well because it helps you be a better thinker and formulate better questions and debate people who are politely, calmly, in an educated way, debate people who have a differing opinion other than yours. But it's vitally important for you to understand both, and perfectly normal for you to gravitate more toward one than the other. So if you want to tell me in a reaction paper which one of these two things you like the best and why, make sure it's an educated why. Make sure you have an example, maybe a current event that you can cite as an outside source. I am examining this current event from a functionalist standpoint or from a conflict theorist standpoint. And you get one of your reaction papers with an outside source done. So make sure that you get started this week if you're ready to do that reaction paper 10 points at a time. Chip off that 100 points with 10 points at a time. Okay, so text me with questions. Read the section in your textbook, chapter 1, that corresponds to this particular topic. Look at Khan Academy on YouTube and learn the way that that instructor presents the ideas behind conflict theory to you. And let's see each other in the next video. Bye.